never thought that coming home a day early from a doctor's appointment would end with me holding my own death warrant. The house was too quiet. I was still on the stairs, one foot on the landing, when Tina's voice cut through the floorboards. She must not live until the end of this week. Laughter followed, hers, Eric's, and Tina's sister. Casual, unbothered, like it was about a plant wilting too slowly. My hand locked around the rail, but I didn't make a sound. I backed up, step by step, and went straight to my room. My top drawer was still locked, or so I thought. Something felt off. I ran my finger along the inner edge and found the tiniest lift on the right. Inside, under a folded pair of compression socks, was a crisp manila envelope with no label. I opened it and found a Do Not Resuscitate form with my full name, forged signature, and a date from last week, 3 days after my surgery. The notary block had the wrong seal for our county. The witness signature? A name I didn't recognize. I stared at the false version of my name, my shaky loops replicated too smoothly. Someone had practiced. Someone close. Downstairs, I waited until I heard a lull in conversation and walked out into the hallway. I didn't speak. I just held the paper out in front of me, hand steady. Eric saw it first. His face drained. Tina looked from me to the paper, squinting, then turned gray when she recognized the header. Neither of them moved. No words, no lies. Just 3 people frozen in the space between exposure and consequence. I turned and walked back to my room, locking the door this time. I scanned every corner, dresser, closet, window frame, looking for whatever else they'd tampered with. I knew this wasn't the only copy, and it sure as hell wasn't the only plan. 3 weeks earlier, I had agreed to stay with them after my surgery for recovery help, not knowing Eric had already met with a probate lawyer and listed the house, my house, on the private market using a quick claim deed I supposedly signed. It had started with a hug at the hospital. Eric kissed my forehead, called me a fighter, and said Tina had set up the downstairs guest room for me. I was groggy, but grateful. It felt good to be looked after for once. The nurse wheeled me out to their car, and I didn't even question the missing necklace I'd worn in. I figured it had been misplaced during the procedure. Now I wonder who took it off and why. The guest room wasn't theirs to offer. That was the first betrayal, subtle as it was. We were technically in my house, a fact that kept skimming past like it didn't count anymore. I'd added Eric to the deed years ago for ease of transition after I nearly died from a stroke. That had been my mistake. I never took him off. But the house was still mine, in spirit and in law. At least that's what I believed, until I overheard Tina say, "The transfer already cleared, don't worry." She signed, technically. I went to the county records site that night and typed in my address. The listing popped up on a luxury private network, buried behind password access. No contingencies, seller motivated, probate in process. I clicked the attached PDF and saw my name on the quick claim form filed 2 weeks ago. My stomach turned. The signature looked like mine, but the tail of the Y in Dorothy curled the wrong way. I knew how I signed my own name. This was an imitation. I printed a screenshot and folded it into my Bible. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed more than gut instinct and an off-looking letter loop. I needed proof that would hold in a courtroom, not just in a family argument. In the first few days, I was told not to answer the phone, discouraged from going outside, and even denied my heart medication once. Red flags I brushed off until Tina joked about how much insurance was on me, and I caught her checking the pill dispenser camera log. It started with little controls. Tina said the wireless doorbell was broken, so I shouldn't go out to check the mail. Eric set the landline to silent and claimed they'd cancel robocalls later. I asked why my doctor's call hadn't come through, and Tina said she'd handled it. I should rest, she said. No stress, no screens. They both smiled too much, like people pretending they weren't keeping a secret in plain sight. The night I skipped a pill was the turning point. I kept my own medication chart, years of habit, but the dispenser said I'd already taken the evening dose. Tina was in the kitchen when I asked, casually, whether the slot had glitched. She blinked, just once, and said maybe I was confused from the anesthesia. I didn't push. I opened the bottle, took the dose anyway, and later checked the Wi-Fi history on my phone. Someone had accessed the app tied to the pill camera. That someone had admin access. That someone wasn't me. 2 days later, as I sat on the back porch folding linens, Tina walked out with her sister. I heard them before they noticed me. Her sister asked, "Is the policy payout automatic?" Tina laughed and said, "Depends how quiet she dies." My hand locked on the sheet in mid-fold. They froze when they saw me, but I just smiled like I hadn't heard. That was the last time they spoke that freely near an open door. After they went inside, I took out the spare key I'd hidden in my cane and unlocked the old shed. I found the camera I'd stored after Ben died, a weatherproof, motion-activated model, and set it up in my room facing the dresser. The SD card was clean. The battery was full. By the following Tuesday, I overheard them arguing about the escrow timeline, and when Eric yelled, "It won't go through if she's still breathing," I called my old neighbor Benji and asked if he still had his IRS scanner. They thought I was asleep. I was upstairs, the bathroom fan running, but I'd cracked the window just enough. Tina was pacing. Eric's voice had that clipped edge he got when things slipped from his grip. "We have a deadline," he hissed. "They won't release the funds until they see a death certificate or hospice confirmation." She asked what else she was supposed to do, and he snapped. "It won't go through if she's still breathing." I didn't flush. I didn't move. I just eased back down the hall and sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, pulse loud in my ears. That was no longer suspicion. That was intent. My son, my only child, was speaking in terms of my expiration date. Not even in metaphor. In paperwork. I waited until midnight and texted Benji using our old code system from the community watch group. "Do you still have the Red Eagle?" It had been 20 years since we cracked tax scams together, but Benji always kept gadgets. His reply came quick. "Still sharp. What's the job?" I told him to meet me at the garden shed. First light. No street talk. Just a simple request. Bring the scanner and gloves. At 7 a.m., he parked by the compost bin, like we were just old folks checking tomato vines. We didn't speak until the shed door shut behind us. I showed him the DNR form. He scanned it without touching the original, checking for layers, edits, metadata. After 10 minutes, he turned the screen to me. The signature line had mismatched pixelation. Compressed, cut, pasted. The notary seal was a JPEG overlay, not part of the original scan. And the ID number? It belonged to a notary in Nevada, not here. "Lawyer," Benji said. "Today." The next morning, Benji met me at the community garden shed with a document scanner and advised me to get legal counsel immediately after scanning the forged DNR, which lacked the correct notary code and showed pixel compression, proof of digital tampering. I didn't sleep much the night before. I kept checking that the flash drive was still where I'd tucked it, beneath the hand-stitched lining of my satchel. My room felt tighter somehow, like the air itself had weight. I replayed every conversation with Eric and Tina over the last 3 weeks, looking for signals I missed. But I wasn't looking backward anymore. I was building a chain, and the forged DNR was the first link. Benji arrived just after 6. He wore gloves, brought 2 scanners, one with a higher resolution, and a new thumb drive sealed in packaging. He scanned the document twice, then zoomed in to show the telltale signs. Blurred pixels around the notary seal, inconsistent ink density along my signature, and an incorrect jurisdiction code that didn't match our county or state. He didn't sugarcoat it. Someone created this on a template site and printed it to pass casual inspection. But it'll crumble in court. I asked if he could track the origin, maybe trace it back to the software or IP. He shook his head. Not without access to the machine that printed it. He paused. But if they submitted it to anyone electronically, the metadata's somewhere. Then he pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and wrote down the name of a forensic legal tech in Sacramento who'd handled a case for his cousin. "Start with your lawyer. Bring this with you." I didn't hug him. I just took the drive, nodded once, and walked back toward the house. My legs felt steady. My chest didn't. Back inside, I opened my closet and ran my fingers along the lining seam, until I found the tiny slit I'd once used to hide birthday money from Ben. I slipped the drive in. But I didn't stop there. I pressed gently at the bottom corner and felt something shift. Inside my closet's lining, I found another clue. A second document, unsigned, listing Eric and Tina as sole next of kin and medical proxies. Dated 4 days before my surgery, with a fax number traced to a mobile law office in Nevada. It was printed on the kind of generic legal paper you get from downloadable forms. No header, no watermark, just a long title and box text in bold. Designation of healthcare proxy and next of kin. My name was typed neatly at the top. Beneath it, Eric and Tina's names appeared side by side, followed by language that would have made me powerless if I'd signed. They'd given themselves total authority, medical decisions, end-of-life choices, even control over where I'd be relocated. No signature line was filled, but that didn't comfort me. It meant they hadn't needed my hand to set the wheels in motion. At the bottom was a fax number and contact block for something called Unity Law Mobile Counsel. I took a photo of the number and typed it into a search bar. It led to a rotating office service registered out of Henderson, Nevada. No website, just a few sketchy listings and a single review complaining about predatory elder contracts. That explained the fake notary. That explained why the DNR wasn't even formatted for California. I sat on the edge of my bed with the unsigned proxy in one hand and the forged DNR in the other, listening to the muffled sound of Tina running a blender downstairs like nothing in the world was rotting behind closed doors. If I hadn't come home a day early, I'd never have found this. I might have been rolled out of that house with a peaceful transition label and cremated before anyone knew what happened. This changed everything. The unsigned form proved intent. It meant they were planning legal groundwork even before I went under. I couldn't just present these to a lawyer. I had to build a chain that showed timing, motive, and fraud. I placed the document in the envelope with the DNR and added a sticky note. Found hidden, closet lining, not signed. Check fax trail. I took the DNR and proxy documents to Marla Ellis, my estate attorney from years ago, who examined the metadata and confirmed what I feared. The documents were created using my stolen ID copy and an out-of-state template designed to bypass local verification. The appointment was slotted for 9:15 a.m., squeezed between two probate consultations. Marla didn't waste time with pleasantries. She motioned me into the chair across from her desk and closed the door with a firm click. I unloaded the file, the forged DNR, the unsigned proxy, the photos, the timestamps. She didn't blink. She just pulled on her glasses and started scanning the documents into her encrypted system, one page at a time, her lips tightening into a thin line the farther she read. When she opened the metadata panel, she turned the monitor so I could see. The DNR file showed creation logs tied to a Nevada-based form generator with no California compliance certification. Worse, it noted an image import timestamp matching the day I was in surgery, meaning someone accessed a digital copy of my ID when I was sedated. The proxy form had similar fingerprints, drafted 4 days before my procedure, printed from a device not registered in our state's legal network, and routed through a disposable fax server. Marla tapped her pen twice. "This isn't sloppy," she said. "This is calculated. Someone used your personal information and planned a chain that would hold long enough to move assets before anyone questioned your condition." She asked if I'd given Eric or Tina access to my ID recently. I told her the truth, only during hospital intake, when both of them insisted on helping me check in. Her jaw clenched. Then this isn't an accident. She printed 3 copies, one for her locked file, one for a forensic examiner she trusted, and one for law enforcement intake. Then she laid her palm flat on the desk. "Dorothy, you need to protect yourself immediately. Physical safety first. Then, financial." I nodded, but inside I felt something steadier than fear. A switch had flipped. These weren't family disputes. These were crimes. Before I left, she handed me a stamped intake form with a reference number for the fraud department and told me she'd begin drafting a protective petition. That evening, while I pretended to nap, Tina entered my room and took photos of my pill bottles and ID, clearly for submission. So I sent the timestamp security footage straight to Marla through the neighbor's Wi-Fi while feeling my breath catch with dread. I kept the light dim and turned toward the window, mouth slightly open, breath measured like sleep. Tina cracked the door just wide enough to slip in. She didn't speak, didn't hesitate, just walked straight to the dresser, slid open the top drawer, and took out my pill organizer like it belonged to her. She pulled her phone from her hoodie and began snapping pictures. First the dispenser, then the labels on the prescription bottles, then a close-up of my driver's license tucked behind the photo of Ben and me. That's when she reached to take it. I shifted, just enough to make the mattress creak. She froze, glanced at my back, then carefully returned the ID to its place and backed out of the room. The entire event lasted maybe 90 seconds. What she didn't know was that the old camera I'd planted, wedged behind a crocheted angel on the bookshelf, had captured everything. High resolution, clear timestamp, full view of her face, the documents, the intent. That footage was more than evidence. It was leverage. The house Wi-Fi was locked down, but I'd found a signal 2 nights earlier. Mr. Hendricks next door hadn't updated his router password since 2018. I uploaded the video to a private drive and forwarded the clip to Marla with a brief note. Caught her harvesting meds and ID timestamp attached. Confirming submission attempts soon. My hand trembled as I hit send. Not from fear, exactly. From how close they'd come to slipping something permanent into my system, hiding behind a falsified record, and calling it natural. I checked the pillbox again that night, counted twice, and then threw the rest into a Ziploc bag, labeling it with the date and time, just in case. Benji texted 5 minutes later. "Got your cloud ping, you good?" I answered, "Not yet, but I will be." Benji helped pull 2 more pieces of evidence. A Zillow screenshot showing pending sale on my house address, and an email forwarded from Eric's account bragging to his friend about getting out from under old lady drama by Thanksgiving. We met that morning under the ruse of repotting dahlias at the side yard. Benji brought coffee, a burner phone, and a tablet he'd wiped clean for the search. No digital fingerprints. He was careful that way. He'd always had a taste for justice, even before retirement. "Let's find the smoke before the fire catches," he said. We started with the house listing. He ran a search through back-end real estate sites using my address and Eric's email, which he'd pulled from a forwarded contact in a family group thread months ago. Within 10 minutes, the property popped up. Zillow, off-market tab, marked pending through a private realty firm. My name was nowhere on the seller profile. The listed owner was E. Harmon, with Tina listed as point of contact for access. There it was in clean sans serif, pending sale, cash buyer, probate finalizing. Benji screen-capped the page, added the URL, and airdropped it to the burner. "That's fraud in writing," he muttered. But it got worse. He dug into cached files linked to Eric's email handle, searching cross-platform for hits. It took some finesse, but he eventually found a public-facing comment Eric had made on a private investor forum, bragging about an upcoming liquidity bump. The exact line, "Finally getting out from under old lady drama by Thanksgiving, the house clears in time." It was dated a week after my surgery. Benji grabbed the permalink and saved it with the house listing. When I saw the words, my ears burned. My son had turned me into an obstacle on a timeline, a weight to shake off. Not a mother, not even a person, just drama. I didn't cry. I don't think I even blinked. I asked Benji to print it all. He handed me the file with quiet precision. The bombshell came when Marla uncovered that Eric had taken out a bridge loan using the equity from my house, requiring him to prove I was terminal, and submitted hospice requests through a third-party medical advocacy group that he paid from our joint account. Marla called me early, her voice tight. She said she'd reviewed the lender documents tied to the address and found a bridge loan issued under Eric's name 2 weeks prior. The collateral? My house. The justification? Owner projected to be in end-of-life care within 30 days pending medical confirmation. My medical records were sealed, yet someone had provided enough information to trigger that classification. She told me to come in immediately. At her office, she placed a stack of printouts in front of me. The hospice request hit hardest. It came from an advocacy service that wasn't affiliated with any local provider. They'd submitted a digital form stating I was in advanced decline, citing complications I never had. Renal failure, respiratory instability. Marla pointed to a payment line. The fee had been charged to the joint account Eric and I opened years ago for emergencies. My access had been quietly removed 3 months earlier. I flipped through the packet slowly, careful not to let my hand shake. Each page added weight I didn't want, but needed. Falsified metrics, outside consultants, signatures that weren't mine. I read the line that tied it all together. Authorization provided by next of kin. That unsigned proxy form I'd found in my closet suddenly made perfect sense. They'd prepped the paperwork, then acted as if they already controlled me. Marla leaned back and tapped the loan agreement. Dorothy, he built a financial structure that only works if you're declared terminal. That's motive with a timestamp. She told me she'd contacted a forensic auditor who could track the transactions back to the advocacy group and the Nevada Fax Service. I slid the hospice request into the growing evidence folder, each sheet sharp against my fingers. This wasn't desperation or bad judgment. It was a plan meant to erase me quietly and profitably. By Thursday, I felt sick not from surgery but betrayal, especially after finding that Tina had begun liquidating my jewelry online, labeling it estate liquidation, so I pretended not to notice and quietly moved my remaining valuables to a neighbor's lockbox. I was folding towels in the laundry room when I noticed the open laptop on the kitchen counter. Tina had stepped out to take a call, and curiosity got the better of me. The browser window was still up. eBay, logged into an account named Tina Clears Estate. The listing photo showed my gold locket. The same one Ben gave me for our 25th anniversary. I clicked into the store. There were 17 active items. Every one of them was mine. The descriptions were brutal in their finality. Estate sale, owner in hospice, family clearing personal effects after medical transition. One even included a shipping estimate dated the following week, as if my pulse had already stopped. My hands went cold. I closed the laptop just as I heard the sliding door open. Tina strolled in with a smoothie, no idea what I now knew. I didn't say a word. That night I waited until they went to bed, pulled my valuables, what was left, from the cedar box under my bed and wrapped them in a dish towel. The remaining earrings, a few family rings, my marriage certificate, and Ben's cufflinks. I called Mrs. Leving from across the street and asked if she still had that fireproof lockbox her daughter gave her. She said yes. I brought her the bundle in a reusable grocery bag, told her not to open it, and slipped her a 20 for her silence. I won't say a word, she said, hugging me tighter than I expected. Back home, I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, looking at the hollow drawer where my mother's bracelet used to be. Tina must have taken it already. I thought of confronting her. But what could she say? That it wasn't theft because I was dying anyway? I cried alone in the garage that night, looking at the broken snow globe my late husband gave me, and swore to myself I would not be buried while still breathing. So I made tea, wrote down a 7-point timeline, and packed my church satchel for the next day. The garage was the only place left in that house where I could let go. I sat on an old stool by the water heater, the air smelling faintly of dust and motor oil, and held the shattered globe in both hands. It had cracked the day after Ben's funeral, when Eric knocked it off the mantel while slamming a cabinet door. He never even looked down. I'd kept the pieces anyway. The tiny couple inside still held hands, even though the glass around them had splintered. Tears came hard, not gentle ones. I wept like something had snapped loose in my chest. Not just because they wanted me gone, but because part of me had believed I was somehow to blame, that maybe I'd been too generous, too trusting, too willing to see family where there was only self-interest. But that grief turned to clarity. They had taken everything but the truth, and the truth could still change the ending. I dried my face, went inside, and made tea, real strong, the way Ben used to drink it when he had hard decisions to make. Then I sat at the kitchen table and drafted a 7-point timeline, surgery date, DNR forgery, escrow listing, pill tampering, the proxy form, the hospice application, and now the theft of property. I added times, screenshots, names. 1 fact per line, no emotion, just facts that held weight. Then I packed my satchel. Flash drives, printed evidence, handwritten notes, a copy of my will, my spare ID. I even included the photo of me and Ben from the bedroom frame. Not because it was necessary, but because I wanted him in the room when it all came out. Friday morning, I asked Marla to organize a meeting under pretense of, quote, reviewing my will update, and she scheduled it for noon in the bank's private conference room, summoning both Eric and Tina by email, BCCing the bank fraud department and my medical provider. I woke before sunrise, dressed in the quiet, and checked my satchel twice. Marla texted at 7:10 a.m. confirming she'd drafted the invitation language. Routine will review. Asset update. Attendance required. Her wording was clean. Just formal enough to keep them from suspecting anything, but urgent enough that Eric would come running to protect whatever he thought he controlled. Tina would follow because she always followed the money. At 8 a.m., Marla forwarded me the copies of the emails. Eric responded in 4 minutes. We'll be there. Tina replied with one word. Confirmed. Their efficiency told me everything. They were terrified of losing momentum. By 9:30, Marla had looped in the bank's fraud officer, a compliance supervisor, and a medical liaison from my provider's legal team. All on blind copy. They won't intervene, she said, but they'll witness everything the moment it becomes evidence. She had also reserved the largest glass-walled conference room at the downtown branch. Neutral territory. Security on site. Cameras recording. I spent the rest of the morning assembling my packet in order. Forged DNR. Proxy draft. Escrow documents. Hospice request. Theft inventory. Screenshots. Footage summaries. No commentary. Just facts aligned like stones and a path leading to a single, inevitable truth. At 11:15, Benji drove me to the bank. I didn't tell him the full plan, only that I needed a witness outside the room. He squeezed my hand and said, "Get your house back." I nodded. Inside the lobby, I watched the second hand on the wall clock sweep around. The room smelled faintly of printer toner and cold air conditioning. My pulse steadied. This was no longer their terrain. The moment Eric and Tina stepped through those glass doors, everything shifted. Inside the bank's conference room, Marla opened with, "Dorothy has a few things to clarify." While I placed the fake DNR, the house listing, and screenshots of escrow emails on the table, watching Eric's grin vanish and Tina drop her phone. The room was silent but charged. One long glass table, a row of chairs along each side, and sunlight pouring in like a spotlight. Eric walked in like he owned it. Button-down shirt, no tie, false confidence in every step. Tina followed, all neutral tones and fake politeness. She nodded at me like I was a guest in their narrative. Marla greeted them calmly and gestured for them to sit. Then, before anyone else could speak, she said Dorothy has a few things to clarify regarding her estate. No fanfare, no build-up, just that one sentence, and then it was mine. I reached into my satchel and pulled out the first file, the DNR with the altered seal. I placed it in the center of the table. Then the second, the Zillow screenshot showing the house marked as pending. Then the escrow emails between Eric and the agent, the ones where he called me nearly resolved. I laid each item like a playing card, slow and steady, until the table spoke louder than anyone in the room. Eric leaned forward to grab the DNR, but Marla stopped him with a hand between the papers. "This is evidence now," she said evenly. Tina's face was blank until she saw the hospice application printout with her email as sender. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered against the tile floor. She didn't pick it up. Eric shifted in his chair, his smile thinning. "I think there's some confusion here," he said. "This isn't what it looks like." I didn't look at him. I looked at the fraud officer through the glass, who gave the faintest nod. They were listening now. Watching. I added the last photo to the pile. Tina, caught on video, snapping pictures of my pill bottles and ID while I lay in bed. I laid out the evidence methodically, starting with the scanned forged DNR, then the medical proxy fax trail, followed by the escrow listing, bridge loan confirmation, and finally, a still frame of Tina taking my meds, with each item shutting down their excuses until Eric said, "This isn't what it looks like." Marla slid a legal pad toward me, not for notes, but for structure. "Walk them through it in order," she whispered. So I did. I spoke clearly, not loud, not emotional, just factual, the way a nurse reads a chart before a procedure. First, the forged DNR. I pointed to the inconsistent pixel patterns, the Nevada notary code, and the creation timestamp matching the day of my surgery. Someone accessed my ID while I was unconscious, I said. Eric's mouth tightened, but he stayed silent. Next, the proxy form. Blank signature, pre-drafted designation, faxed through a mobile office across state lines. I tapped the date. 4 days before I went under. Tina shifted in her chair, eyes darting to the side like she was searching for a version of the story that didn't exist. Then came the real estate documents. The private listing. Escrow emails. The agent's message confirming the buyer's timeline. I tilted the page toward Eric. You listed my house as a probate property. I wasn't in probate. I wasn't even home. His face drained of color. I followed with the bridge loan. Marla took over for a moment, explaining how he'd leveraged equity using medical claims filed under terminal status. The fraud officer, watching from the doorway, nodded as she spoke. Finally, I placed the still frame on the table. Tina, leaning over my bedside, phone angled at the medication labels. The timestamp glowed in the corner. This is you, in my room, taking documentation I never authorized, I said. Whatever flimsy narrative they'd rehearsed collapsed right then. Eric tried to recover, leaning back like he wasn't cornered. This isn't what it looks like, he said. It is exactly what it looks like, I answered. Marla pressed a button on the intercom to summon compliance. That ended the discussion. Marla turned to the bank's compliance officer, who stated calmly that a fraud report had already been filed, the escrow was frozen, and that forgery and elder exploitation carried felony charges. At which point Tina's face crumpled, and Eric started blaming her. The door opened with a quiet click, and the compliance officer stepped fully into the room. Clipboard in hand, badge visible. She introduced herself, then spoke without emotion, as if reading a weather report. A formal fraud investigation has been opened, based on documentation provided by Mrs. Harmon's legal representative. The escrow process has been paused, the bridge loan flagged, and a report submitted to state authorities under California Penal Code 368, elder financial abuse. Eric's head snapped toward Marla. You went to the bank already? Marla didn't answer. She didn't need to. Tina sank lower in her chair, fingers clenched in her lap. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. When the officer added that law enforcement would likely follow up within 48 hours, and that bank assets had been locked pending identity verification, Tina cracked. Her voice hitched, breath quick and shallow. I didn't even want to do all this. It was his idea. Eric turned on her so fast, the chair scraped the floor. You're the one who contacted the hospice people. You sent the emails. You took the pictures. His voice rose an octave, losing that thin layer of calm he always wore when cornered. Don't act innocent now, Marla cut in. We don't need confessions. The evidence stands on its own. The compliance officer nodded. You're both now flagged across our internal systems. Any further transactions will be reviewed manually. We'll also be forwarding this case to Adult Protective Services and, if requested, to the district attorney's office. I watched them both shrink. Eric silent, jaw tight, Tina wiping her nose with the back of her hand. Neither looked at me, not once. When security stepped inside to escort them out, they didn't argue, just stood and followed. Outside the glass wall, other clients paused, watching the parade of disgrace. When the bank officer asked if I wanted to pursue full charges or initiate a civil freeze, I said firmly, both, and stood while security arrived to escort Eric and Tina from the premises as onlookers watched through the glass wall in stunned silence. It wasn't a question I'd prepared for out loud, but I knew the answer before she finished speaking. We can open a criminal case with your consent, or place a full civil freeze while the investigation proceeds. Your call, Mrs. Harmon. I looked straight at her. Both. Marla nodded once, already opening the intake folder she'd prepped for this exact outcome. The fraud officer handed me a simple form. Just 2 boxes to check, and a signature line. I marked them without hesitation and passed it back. Across the table, Eric leaned forward like he might say something. Some plea, some defense, some watered-down apology to preserve his image. I didn't give him the chance. I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. My knees weren't shaking anymore. My voice didn't crack. You thought I wouldn't fight, I said. That's the part you never understood. 2 security officers entered, both calm, both silent. One gestured toward the door. Tina moved first, head down, her steps small and quick. Eric followed, stiff-backed, refusing to meet my eyes. As they passed the glass wall of the conference room, heads turned. People stopped mid-conversation, mid-deposit. They didn't know the details, but they knew shame when they saw it. That's what it looked like. 2 people exposed, not by drama or gossip, but by facts too sharp to bury. Once the door closed, Marla looked at me and said, "It's done." But I knew better. The damage they'd tried to cause, erase me, sell my home, rewrite my end, needed more than paperwork to undo. Back at my home, keys returned, locks changed, I placed the snow globe on the mantel and smiled when Benji handed me the notarized affidavit naming me sole owner again, with Marla handing me the formal restitution agreement and a new medical directive in my name. The locksmith finished just before noon. Every lock, doors, garage, even the old side gate, replaced and rekeyed. I tipped him in cash and asked that he never give duplicates to anyone but me. He nodded, without asking why. People know when not to ask. Benji arrived a few minutes later, holding a slim folder. Inside was the affidavit, stamped and notarized, affirming that the title had been restored solely in my name. "I filed it this morning," he said. "They'll send confirmation within 10 days. Marla followed behind with the final paperwork, a restitution agreement outlining the frozen assets, and a formal record of returned items. "You've regained legal control of everything they tried to take," she said, placing the envelope gently in my hand. "And this," she added, sliding one more document across the table, "is your new medical directive. No proxies. All decisions come from you." I nodded, too full to speak. Later, I stood in the living room, holding the repaired snow globe. I placed it back where it belonged, centered, steady. It no longer looked broken.